Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Walking Classroom. My name is Ellie, and I'm joined by Caden and our real-life teacher, Mrs. Fenn. Remember that as you are walking with us today, only one ear should be covered with an earbud or headphone. Stay aware of your surroundings and stay with your group. Keep a quick pace to get the full benefits of your walk.
Boy, Miss Fenn, I sure learned a lot in that assembly we had yesterday about bullying.
Bullying is such a big problem, but I think that learning about it and recognizing what it is can go a long way toward ending it.
I never really thought about it before yesterday, that bullying is more than one person hurting another person.
That's right. Bullying isn't just about physical stuff like hitting or tripping. It can be teasing or name-calling. It can also be doing stuff like excluding someone from a group on purpose.
There's verbal bullying, words, and social bullying. Do you remember what needs to be present for bullying to occur?
There are two things. First off, it happens more than once. The bully doesn't just hurt their victim with words or actions one time.
The second thing is an imbalance of power. The bully uses their physical strength or social status or knowledge of embarrassing information to hurt their victim.
We learned in the assembly that knowing and talking about bullying could help prevent it.
And that's right. The more we talk about it, the better. Talking about it with an adult, like a teacher or a parent, is an important first step. Make sure your friends understand what it is as well.
So, Mrs. Fenn, what will we be working on in creative writing tomorrow since we missed it for the bullying assembly?
Well, tomorrow we're going to start writing our own stories.
Oh, cool. I have tons of ideas. I'm going to be able to write a story in no time.
Something tells me Mrs. Fenn will want us to sit down and plan out our projects.
Well, I already have a lot decided. I know my characters' names and where the story will take place and what happens.
You know what, Caden, that's wonderful and important. But before you can write anything, you have to decide who is going to tell your story and how they will tell it. That's called point of view. It's one of the most important elements to any piece of writing. Do you remember the different kinds of point of view?
We've learned about first person and third person, but I've heard that there's also second person, but we only talked about first and third.
First person is also called the I point of view. For example, I went to an amusement park last weekend. The narrator not only tells the story, they are also a character in the story.
That's right. Can you give me an example of a sentence using third person?
Third person is the he or she point of view. The story would say, he went to an amusement park last weekend. In third person, the narrator is not a character in the story.
Is that all we need to know?
Well, in first person, we learn about things when the narrator learns about them. We know the feelings of the narrator because he or she can share them with us.
It's almost like we're right there, along for the ride with them. It's the narrator's story, so we feel very close to it.
Can you two think of some books that you've read that were written from first person point of view?
The Diary of a Wimpy Kid books are the first example I can think of. Those stories are all told from Greg's point of view. In the first book, Greg starts it by saying, "First of all, let me get something straight. This is a journal, not a diary." He says, "me." He's telling the story. He is the one narrating, the first person.
My sister likes the Junie B. Jones books. Those are also first person and are told by Junie B. They always start off with something like, "My name is Junie B. Jones. The B stands for Beatrice, except I don't like Beatrice. I just like B, and that's all."
It's very common for first-person stories to be told by the protagonist. Remember that a protagonist is the hero or heroine of the story, usually the main character. Do you know some examples of books written from a third-person perspective?
The Magic Treehouse books. Also, one of my favorite books, Charlotte's Web, is a third-person book. The narrator is not in the story. The narrator is sort of watching the story and telling us the different events as they happen. For example, at the beginning of Charlotte's Web, it says, "Where's Papa going with that axe?" said Fern to her mother as they were setting the table for breakfast. It's almost like the narrator is watching the story with us or for us and explaining what's happening.
That's a great example, Caden. Let's talk about how the different types of points of view help us know what the characters are thinking or feeling. You mentioned that in first person, we know the feelings of the narrator because the narrator can tell us. For example, when Junie B. Jones said she didn't like the name Beatrice, we didn't have to guess why she only uses her middle initial. She told us. How's that different than with third person?
Well, with third-person narration, the narrator is not limited to only knowing his or her own thoughts and feelings. The narrator can know about the thoughts and feelings of many different characters in the story.
What do you think might be an advantage of that?
Well, we can have a better idea of how each character thinks and feels about events instead of just knowing about one character.
That's true, Ellie. Telling a story in first person is definitely limited. You know less about what is happening in the other parts of the story, and you only know what's happening with the narrator.
Well, there are lots of pros and cons to each approach, and that's why it's so important to make this decision before you start writing your story. Remember, you are deciding who is going to tell your story.
Can we take one of my ideas and talk about the ways it would be different using the first person and third person points of view?
I think that sounds like an excellent idea.
Okay. Well, my first idea is a story about a girl named Lisa, who's really interested in rocks and fossils. She goes on a camping trip with her family and finds a fossil that looks like it came from a very unusual flower. When she returns home, she wants to donate it to a museum, but there are some evil people who want to steal it from her.
Does this have anything to do with that rock you found last summer?
Yep, that's where I got the idea. Why?
I've just heard a lot about this very special rock of yours.
Hey, don't be surprised when I become rich and famous because of that rock.
I promise to wait very patiently for that to happen. Tell us what else happens in your story.
I haven't worked out all the details, but Lisa and her family start to think that the fossil might be very, very valuable. They try to outrun the bad guys and get to a fossil expert in Washington, D.C.
I like it. It sounds like a very interesting and suspenseful idea. Let's think about the different ways that we could tell the story.
Well, if I wrote it in first person, it would be from Lisa's point of view. I could write something like, I woke up early on our first day of vacation because I was so excited to go down to the river and hunt for fossils. I walked along the water's edge for a long time until the campsite was very far behind me. Out of the corner of my eye sprouted a very flat, pale rock. When I picked it up, I knew I had made my greatest fossil discovery ever.
By telling it in first person, it's very exciting when she finds the fossil. We understand just how much she is interested in fossils and why she likes to hunt for them.
After that, I could say something like, I put the fossil in my pocket and ran back to the tent. My mom and dad were sitting outside tending the fire. My heart was beating so hard. I knew that this time I had found something important.
Your description gives us a very good understanding of just how excited Lisa is and how important this is to her. We also have a good sense that this is something she's done in the past.
But if I tell it in first person, we'll only know what her family thinks by what they say or do.
Right. Otherwise, we will only know Lisa's feelings. Maybe her dad is doubtful about whether the discovery is of any real importance.
But we would only know her dad felt that way if the writer has him say something like, I wouldn't get too excited. It might not be anything.
Or maybe he shakes his head and crosses his arms across his chest when Lisa is showing it to her family.
Right. Both of those actions and words tell us about what her dad is thinking, but it's still being told through Lisa's eyes. If her dad was always doubting her, she might feel especially disappointed by his actions.
Or it might make her more determined to prove to him that the fossil really is special.
So you're saying that we have to remember that the narrator's thoughts or opinions are a big part of the story in first person?
Absolutely. Whatever you are reading, you rely on the narrator to give you the information. If the narrator doesn't like a particular character or event in the story, that opinion could become part of what you're reading, even if it isn't necessarily true. In the Diary of a Wimpy Kid books, for example, Greg talks about being stuck in middle school with a bunch of morons. We don't really know if those kids are perhaps not so smart. We only know that Greg thinks of them that way.
Though, if I wrote the story from third person, it might sound something like this. Lisa walked along the water's edge looking for unusual rocks. She had a hard time sleeping the night before, knowing she would go fossil hunting today. Far away from the campsite, an unusual rock caught her eye.
I suppose it isn't very different from first person, but it does sound a little bit like we took a step back from the action.
That's exactly right. So in the next part, you have other characters in the scene. You could say something like, Lisa put the fossil in her pocket and ran back to the tent. Her mom and dad were sitting outside tending the fire. Her mom worried that Lisa might trip and fall while running so fast. Her dad hadn't slept much the night before and was not looking forward to another one of Lisa's dramatic discoveries.
Wow, that's so much different than the first-person version. We know how Lisa's mom and dad are feeling, and it gives us a better idea of everything that's happening.
Exactly. It might be a story told by taking a step back, but you're actually able to see more of the picture that way.
If I told Lisa's story in third person, it would make it even more dramatic later in the story, when the bad guys were trying to steal the fossil. I could talk about how scared each member of her family is. Maybe her dad is angry things have gotten so out of hand.
You could even talk about what the bad guys are doing or why they are after the fossil.
I never thought of it that way. Third person would tell a much bigger version of the story, but we would miss out on some of the fun rooting so hard for Lisa because it's her story.
And as I mentioned earlier, there are good and bad sides for each point of view. Only the writer can decide which works better for them.
Mrs. Fenn, we've been talking about made-up stories. What about true stories? Can they be told from different points of view?
Sure. We've only discussed fiction. True stories, or nonfiction, can also be told in different ways. The first person, or the I point of view, is most often used in personal memoirs or essays, like when a person is telling the true story of their own life. They might say, I attended college in Boston, Massachusetts.
Wait, what about third person?
Well, the he or she perspective is often used in history books. It might say something like, he attended college at the age of 18.
How about if we go over the pros and cons of each point of view again?
Good idea, Ellie. First person is the I point of view. The narrator is the character in the story. We feel close to the narrator because we know everything they think and feel. It's like we're inside their head. We just have to remember that what we know about the story is limited.
Right, we only see what the main character sees. If something in the story happened across town and the main character isn't there, there has to be a different way to tell that information.
And there are lots of different ways to do that. You could have another character tell the main character what happened, or the main character could overhear other characters talking about it. You just need to be aware of it.
And third person is the he or she point of view. The narrator is close enough to the story to tell it, but they also see everything around the main character. The narrator is watching the story happen like a movie. They know the feelings of lots of characters, not just one.
You know what, guys? We could talk about this topic for hours, but we're close to the end of our walk. The important thing to remember is that there are lots of possibilities.
It seems to me like that's part of the fun of writing. You can experiment until you find something that works for you.
When we get back to the classroom, we'll take a few books from the bookshelves and see whether they're told from first person or third person point of view. Then we can talk about ways that the story might be different if it was told from the other point of view. Would it make you like the book more or less? Do you think it would make the story more interesting or less interesting? Students, on your way back to class, discuss with a partner your favorite book and see if you can remember how the story is told, first person or third person. How do you think the story would be different if it were told from a different perspective? Thanks for joining us today, and as always,
Happy trails!